Definitely having the diagnosis and the treatment is very helpful for breaking down the kind of shame that often people will feel about how mental health conditions can affect our behavior. So having the diagnosis is useful for accessing medical treatment and for being more forgiving with myself and more understanding and developing strategies.
Hi, I am Sophie Vaux, and this is the Rise and Play podcast. In the show, I sit down with influential thought leaders of the gaming industry to deconstruct how they create the best team and company cultures in order to create the best games. Every episode brings actionable insight to improve your leadership, self-awareness, and emotional management skills. Because becoming a better leader starts with becoming a better human. So, are you ready to unlock your full potential in life and business? Let's begin. I'm very excited to tell you more about today's sponsor, Thorsten. I've been a big fan of Thorsten Mission since I met the founders in the early days. As a product manager, I believe in deeper player research at a human and psychological level, understanding the why of the players, instead of relying solely on behavioral data. The player intelligence products offer the insights you need to create novel experiences in your segment, whether you're developing a new title or improving a live experience for millions of players. Thorsten AI-driven psychological insights provide a depth of player understanding that is impossible to achieve with surface-level metrics. Create more accurate product assumptions, accelerate development cycles, and improve marketing performance when you understand your players at a fundamental human level. Visit go.thorsten.io that you can find in the show notes and mention Rise and Play for a demo and receive 30% off your first Thorsten engagement crafted to your studio's needs. Learn why EA, Supercell, Wooga, and more use Thorsten to create the best human-centric gaming experiences possible. So hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Rise and Play. And today I'm excited and also curious on the topic we will address today. Mental health challenges. It's not just some people who have it. Everyone can have mental health challenges at different time of their life, phase, context, but they are part of our lives. So that's where I wanted to start this episode today, focusing here on leadership topic. How are we approaching it and how do we even work with it when we are in a position of responsibility and leadership? And that's what we will talk about today with our guest, Alice Bowman. So she's been working in mobile games for 9 years and she's worked for Trailmix, NetSpeak Games and Outplay Entertainment. And her most recent role is a product lead at Mag Interactive. And alongside her work, Alice is also an advocate for D&I in the industry and spends a lot of her free time mentoring new joiners to the games industry. So, hey, Alice, welcome.
Hi, Sophie. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm really excited to talk about this.
Yeah. So as I gave the introduction and the context, as a disclaimer, we are really here to deconstruct what is mental health about. Not that we are doctors or psychologists, but it's important here to describe it as either having experienced it or being with people who have experienced it to give more awareness for listeners on even how to approach it. So let's begin with setting the context for you here as well. Why is it an important topic for you particularly?
I think even no matter what I do, it would always massively affect my life. Ever since I was a teenager, I've struggled with my mental health and I've had problems that have impacted my ability to fulfill my goals and to just be happy every day and do things. And over my life, it's been a really evolving relationship. And at different times, it's had much more impact on me. And then sometimes it's been something that's just been at the back of my mind, having a small impact on my life. But it matters to me because it's something that's quite inescapable. And I see it affect other people as well. And I know that some people find it hard to talk about. And without the support from the people around you, we can lose people. And that might mean losing them from the industry, or it might mean losing them altogether. And if I wasn't able to talk about this with my close friends and family, I don't think I would be here today. So I want to try and create a culture at work where we can talk about these things and support each other.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I do understand that, yeah, it's also from your own personal experience, it's been part of your life. And that's also something I want to ask, because I did experience, of course, at different times mental health issues. I haven't always recognized them when they happen. So the way you talk about it seems like you have been quite aware and familiar with it over time. So here as well, for the ones who don't even understand or have a grasp of what mental health is, what we call neurodiversity. Could you elaborate more of what does it cover? Specific example, whether they are yours or in general?
Yeah, definitely. So my first kind of encounter with any sort of mental health diagnosis was as a teenager going to the doctors. I'd sort of heard about depression, but it felt like this big, scary word. And I was talking about how sad I was feeling. And eventually we did land that I needed therapy and I had depression, and I tried antidepressants. I think I was probably 15 when that conversation began in my life. And then I quickly realized that social anxiety was a massive component of the way I felt a lot of the time as well. And I think for me, that was not a condition that I just have, but something I developed in response to sort of events in my life and the way that I had interacted with my peers in school and like the negative experiences that I had there. But it was only during the pandemic that I realized that there was something else going on with me as well. And like a lot of other people, I heard more and more people talk about ADHD and more discussions around it. But I also found that when I was left to my own devices to do work, that I encountered these massive problems with my motivation, my ability to focus, my memory. And I had this kind of massive lapse in my ability to do anything. So that led eventually to an ADHD diagnosis, where it's kind of very retrospective that I'm recognizing that things that I thought were just a part of my personality are influenced by this. And it's such a weird, blurry line. Like, where do we separate like what our mental health is versus who we are as people? But it definitely gave me some validation to learn about that and to learn about how it might affect me to be unwell in this way, or in the case of ADHD, to have this like neurodiversity, or a lot of things that I was just blaming myself for and getting upset about with myself, and learning that it was something that can just impact you in this way. It helped me be a lot more forgiving and sort of learn how to cope with it.
Yeah, I can imagine that it's not very helpful. You have a certain condition and you are guilting yourself on top. It doesn't help. It's another quite a negative feeling on top. I would like to spend some time on here a definition of what we call depression and other form of social anxiety, because these days I think people are just more aware. There's been more publication about it, statistics released. What was the statistic in the US? 2021, 70% of people are feeling in burnout at work. So this is where is the blurred line for me. What is it that we can call depression, for example? And what you have described, of course, are symptoms of it, and you have talk to a doctor. But now that you have also experienced it, would you say is it a difference how you feel and you can say, I feel I have depression, or it's quite a different thing than go being checked by a doctor, diagnosed, and then having a proper treatment?
Definitely having the diagnosis and the treatment is very helpful for breaking down the kind of shame that often people will feel about how mental health conditions can affect our behavior. So having the diagnosis is useful for accessing medical treatment and for being more forgiving with myself and more understanding and developing strategies. It did help just knowing where that behavior in myself was coming from. But I think at the same time, depression is such a widespread thing and it can affect people in so many different ways that there is actually a lot of freely available help out there and sort of self-care tips and advice that if we kind of know that about ourselves but don't have access to a doctor who can give us that diagnosis, or don't feel comfortable going to the GP or your doctor about it, that's not to say that it's a negative thing to look at the self-help tips. Like, there are lots of ways you can help yourself that are published by like respectable sources and are proven to be able to support people. So, like in the UK, the NHS has a lot of self-help advice. And then there's lots of charities as well in different countries. One specific to the games industry is Safe in Our World, and they have advice on working with mental health in the games industry and also links to charities for if you need support and if you need like help right now. So I think that ultimately the diagnosis is like a gateway into other stuff that can help you. It doesn't change how you're feeling and it doesn't make your feelings more or less valid, but it can help you sort of access the things you need.
It's also another commitment to recognize that you're not feeling well, that there's something that is happening in you, and to commit to go to the doctor to be checked. Of course, related to your own experience, how do you identify or feel that there's something off that is beyond just feeling under the weather? What are the signs that a person can get for themselves to think, okay, maybe there's more?
Yeah, with the ADHD specifically, it got to a point where I was so angry with myself and so frustrated. Like most days I would cry because I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And kind of had a bit of a breakdown where I hit rock bottom and just felt incapable of achieving even simple things. And I was dealing with like physical health issues at the same time. So it was a really difficult time for me. But it was through talking to my friends and my support network and kind of seeing other people talk about what was happening to them that allowed me to realize. And I actually was dating someone at the time and talking to them about the problems I was having. And she said to me, like, I think you have ADHD. And that then started off the route to getting the diagnosis there. And then with the depression and the social anxiety, it was again just like seeing how extreme it could be. With the depression, there was times where I couldn't get out of bed. And I know that's a really common thing for people who are suffering from severe depression, because you know when you can't get out of bed that something is not right. And for social anxiety, I would sometimes develop a bit of a stutter depending on how nervous I was feeling, or not feel like I could say anything at all, or have panic attacks in social situations. And for me, I've come a really long way with that, because I can now do public speaking and meet people and be quite chatty and relaxed. I think that's because for me, it was like this kind of thing triggered by a specific trauma and events that happened. And so it's not core to who I am. And I was able to almost heal from that and change again and become more extroverted once more.
It's a great example, and I think also very actionable, like by talking about it, maybe almost normalizing, like it's not something that you are suffering with alone. There are others, many millions, there are treatment or there are solution for it. So, and for that, to get even that loop of feedback, you need to talk about it, right? When in doubt, and if you have a good support network, and I think here it's important to mention your friends, family, close people who are listening and supportive. It feels safe to share, that people can help you reflect and realize something maybe is not right. And there are more physical things, like you said, as well, not being able to wake up, or the feeling of anger when it comes to ADHD. And then like back to the topic of work. So the first like 2 ones, when you talk about depression, social anxiety has been incorporated part of your life. You could live with it. ADHD was the one found out later. So how did those things affected your work? I'm not sure if always in a conscious way. So how has it been for you?
Yeah, it's definitely affected my work in massive ways over the course of my career. Like in terms of the depression, there was a point where I just wasn't myself, because I wasn't doing any extracurricular stuff. I was kind of doing the bare minimum in one of the early jobs I had at the start of my career. And I was deeply unhappy because of the depression, and then the lack of stimulation I was getting because I was so disengaged at work made it even worse. So it was a cycle. And eventually I was able to pull out of that because of going to a doctor and going on to some new antidepressants. And it's interesting because I've realized the medication I take has an impact on how much work I do. If there's days where I forget to take it, I become more sort of lethargic and like It's harder for me to do things. Sometimes when I'm off of it, I have more bursts of creativity as well. So it affects us in these different ways. And the ADHD side of things, I think, has impacted me all my life. And I just haven't realized that, like, I can't be stimulated by doing one thing. I have to be doing 6 different things in a day and flitting between them. And I think a lot of people who have ADHD recognize themselves in that, where you need to have lots of things to focus on. And sometimes I will be like, I really have to finish some work for a deadline. And I'll find myself in a different tab writing an email to someone, doing something completely unrelated. And you just kind of think, well, how did I get here doing this work instead? But I find it useful to have like parallel projects or parallel tasks that I'm doing, so that if I'm moving between them, it's positive progress no matter where I'm putting my attention.
And here you're talking about your own management, right? I wonder, how open have you been at work? You are talking publicly on a podcast here, so I assume that you're open about it. But I wonder if that has always been the case. And what was the conversation you had with yourself? Like, should I share about it at work? Will that help me? Or it's better to not mention it? How was your journey there, and how open you would be and mention it at work?
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot over the years, because when I started in the industry, there wasn't really like people talking about taking mental health days or talking openly about their struggles at work. And nowadays it's like you have often offices will have mental health first aiders, and there'll be like signs or access to different helplines and resources, and people will be told they can take mental health days if they need. And I think that's really amazing that the culture in the industry and in the workplace has moved along so far in like a relatively short amount of time. But when I started off, if I needed a mental health day, I wouldn't have been able to imagine saying that that was what I needed. I would usually just say that I was feeling physically unwell, because that's something that everyone can understand. And back then I couldn't imagine people understanding the depression side of it, just because it wasn't something we were talking about in the same way. But as my career's moved on and the conversation around mental health has moved on as well, I do find myself able to talk quite openly about these things. I've had some amazing managers over the years who have received that really well and looked for ways to help me, and have sort of met my openness with their own openness and talked about their struggles as well. And that's been so beneficial to me, to feel seen and understood, and to know that someone I admire can also have these struggles. So that's really helped me and encouraged me to be more open and vulnerable, because it's actually a bit of a strength. And then with ADHD, it was hard because I didn't get my diagnosis for a really long time. And I felt almost fraudulent to talk about it, because I was like, I don't know if this is a real thing or not, or just an excuse. That's the thing I kept coming back to, the idea that I was constructing an excuse for some sort of failure on my part. And I was really afraid that I wouldn't get the diagnosis, or that if I went to my workplace to talk about it without having a diagnosis, that it would be kind of unfounded. Actually, I think that was really unfair on my employers at the time when that was happening, because they would have been incredibly supportive. But the way that manifested was when things went really wrong and I had that kind of rock bottom, it was then like an excuse, because I was then afterwards telling them what had been going on. And I think no matter how like open and empathetic people are, it's always hard to hear about things after the point where you could have helped someone has gone and been, and it's already impacted their work. So now that I've gone through that, I do really try and encourage people to be more open from the start. Now that I've got my diagnosis and I've kind of learned from that experience, I try and be really open about stuff. So if there's like some struggle I'm going through and I'm having a one-to-one, I will bring it up and talk about it. Like, what I haven't done, I guess, is taken anyone aside and been like, I've got these things and I need this support, just because I don't feel like I need that kind of support. But I have been talking about it since starting my new role. So that's the way that I like to try and communicate it. And then if I see it becoming a problem, I would bring it up in a one-to-one.
I think it's a great example and it's very inspiring. And I can't imagine how hard it is to come forward, especially at a time when it's might not always feel safe to talk about those things because, like you said, it was not so much in the topic. So one thing I can highlight is that the environment of work is set up in a way that proven examples that it's okay to talk about mental health, right? Whether you are the one starting, of course, the movement, so you always take the risk when you're the first, and then this is the opportunity to prove you right or wrong, or others have done this before, and then you can see that it's safe to do. But I think it's important here to mention for people to be able to feel that they could be open, that they feel that already by the environment around them and the openness of people they share, whether it's colleagues or in one-on-one with managers, how open and supportive people are. And I can share as well, having been in a position like of manager for many years now, I did have some conversation, this type of personal information being shared, and that was very helpful because in your best intent as a manager, you want to help support your people, your team. You don't fully understand the context and what could be the blockers, so you work with what you know. And when the person has been open enough to share, okay, this, I really appreciate it because then it's like, I do know that and I'll take it into account. But there's an explanation for maybe some days that are maybe more difficult, and having the real conversation, like how can we truly support and not just on surface. And this is where it could even change the environment, if the culture we have when people are more open to give suggestions, like, have you thought about this, or those health days where instead of pinning certain people to say, okay, for the ones who have health challenges, please come forward and ask for your health days, and like create the system where maybe some who don't feel safe about it don't have to be public to also enjoy the perks of a supportive working environment. I don't know if you have other ideas of things that has been helpful for you.
There's been like all kinds of people and like policies and stuff at the workplaces I've been at over the years that have made these things easier for me as I've kind of matured in the industry and spent more time here. Like, I think part of it is that you have to feel safe, like you have to feel psychologically safe to make yourself vulnerable in some way. And some of that comes from the workplace and the people you work with, but also some of it comes from you and your confidence levels. And so as I've become more established in the industry, I've spent more time here, I feel more sure of myself and I feel more driven to do for others what has been done for me, with seeing like more experienced people take these risks and be open. And so that's like why I want to be a voice who's like contributing to making these things easier. In terms of specifics, I think it's amazing that so many studios nowadays are aware that there are different needs depending on who your employees are, and actually care about like what happens to you outside of work. Because early in my career, there were some conversations I had where I would try and talk about what was happening in my life, and I'd be told that shouldn't affect your work and I don't care to hear about it, like that kind of response. Things have changed so much since then. And I think that I've also been fortunate enough to work with a lot of people who've cared a lot more. And there's a lot of people in the industry who know so much about like this kind of like inclusive way of working and how we can accommodate for different mental health conditions or for neurodiversity. One of the people who really changed how I think about what I can do and how I can help was at Traumix. Lauren Alper at Traumix is really amazing at this kind of thing, but she came from working with healthcare and mental health. And so she had like this wealth of knowledge that she brought with her into the role originally as office manager, and then working more in people and culture and diversity and inclusion in Traumix. And so having someone come from outside of the games industry and bring that expertise was really useful, I think, with just all of us learning a lot more about it. And so she's been a great influence, I think, even in how I try and like have like that dynamic with people I work with, be open and help them and stuff.
I think it's for sure helpful to have someone, the word is not ambassador, but really as a knowledgeable who comes and brings the knowledge, learning, education to others, because this is where another point of challenge I have found as well in the workplace. The line is becoming really blurry between where is the responsibility or how much should you care as an employer and per personal life. And both are, of course, really closely connected, right? Especially in creative works or where you have a lot of yourself in your job, games, it's a job of passion. So I would say separating radically the two worlds, I don't think it's very realistic these days. However, I think this is where we haven't found really the exact blueprint on how do we separate them as well clearly, not only as an employer, but also for employees. Because, for example, educating others about mental health issues is a plus that a company does, one can say, to really help you, give you the tools so you can feel well at work, but it will impact your personal life. But the other way can happen as well, where the work can become the place of blame, where if you feel in a certain way with certain mental health condition, the common belief will be it's because of work, it's because of that person, but it's not necessarily the people experiencing the mental health is the one witnessing it, not understanding how complex it is, right? So as you are explaining here, I haven't heard you mention about a specific workplace that has made you feel this way. It's much more complex. It's a multiple factor. So how do you see like this confusion of line, like mental health responsibility between personal, individual and company?
I think it's really tough because that element of duty of care, or I guess pastoral care towards like the people you work with, if you're a manager or you own the company or something, like that's a really tough burden to take home with you if you're just in it to make games. Like, for instance, during the pandemic, talking about the responsibility and the burden of worrying about what would happen to the team and how everyone was feeling. And I think a lot of compassionate people who manage others have felt that burden in recent times because it feels like there's so much going on in the world. And like talking really openly about our mental health means that everyone kind of knows that you're suffering with that. And so if you're a compassionate, empathetic manager, that leaves you wanting to help. But the boundary, I guess, for the employee's sake and for your sake, I don't think there's a clear answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
Like all relationships, it's a boundary that's built together, and the workplace you both work for can kind of have set rules about some of that, where they say like the boundary is going to go up to here and they can impact it in that way. But I think at the end of the day, like anytime that as an individual, someone's experiencing mental health struggles, you have your support system, and work might be a part of that. And individuals at work might be an even more significant part of that, whether they're like your friends outside of work or just people you work really closely with, or they're trying to support you. But at the end of the day, your mental health is your own responsibility, and your support network can help you, but it's not their responsibility to keep you safe. And sadly, sometimes people do become really dependent on individuals or a workplace and things like that. And as someone on the receiving end of that in the support network, you can't blame yourself for what happens to that person or try and be responsible for them, because you can't make someone else feel better no matter how much you want to. And you can't make someone productive no matter how much you want to help them.
I do like the nuanced answer. I think it's in your own words as well about your own responsibility, about your mental health. It's not how it feels in the moment where you are feeling unwell, and that I understand. But on the company side here as well, to support people who are building companies or teams, to be very clear about those boundaries. And there's no clear right or wrong. There's, of course, how much you care and support the people, but how much you are capable or willing to support. But at the end of the day, it's important to differentiate that the purpose of a company is not to create a place that is just supporting people, but we are here to create games. And how do we help support a group of people, talents coming from everywhere, with back to neurodiversity, with different abilities, different background, different skills, talents, to work together?
We're definitely learning so much. Like as an industry, we're learning, and as individuals, we're all learning about ourselves and about these wider topics. Like I know so much more about myself now than I did 10 years ago, and it allows me to come up with strategies that support me better, and hopefully to kind of put some of those things I've learned about myself into becoming more empathetic and being able to support other people better, because that's what I choose to do as someone in the industry. I want to do that when I have the energy to do it. I guess a lot of it comes down to what you're saying that you'll do and the expectations and managing them. Because if an employer told me that they were going to offer me loads of therapy as part of my work and be an amazing supportive place, I would have a certain expectation going in, and I would feel let down if that wasn't met. And I do think that they have a duty to provide that support. But then if they haven't said that, I'm not going to expect all those things. And it's a nice additional gesture if they do offer them later down the line. Like, I think that managing expectations is probably a really key thing. And having an open conversation about it as well, like being willing to listen. If someone is asking for certain accommodations, because I guess there's also, when you get to neurodiversity, there's like a legal side of it as well, that it's considered a disability to have ADHD. And so if you ask for certain accommodations at work, there has to be efforts made to try and meet them. There is like a baseline level of support that has to be offered. And then above that, there's a baseline of what makes you a decent kind of employer and a nice place to work and a kind manager. And then somewhere above that, it's like there's no ceiling to that. It's what you want to do as an individual and what you have the capacity to do and the capability to do and the resources your company has and what your mission is. Because like if you're making games that are all about supporting people's mental health, then maybe as a company culture, it's more important to have that be really baked into how you work as an employer and things like that as well.
Yeah. And I appreciate the ideas that you brought up because they are realistic. And I have also known of workplaces, and we are thinking about those as well in my own company, how to establish those and being clear about the expectations, having more acknowledgement and awareness that you can be a way to take care of your mental health and what have a conversation from a legal obligation, but also being, a supportive employer that you can go beyond to do and support the return. And because there's a really discomfort and lack of knowledge when you are not experiencing yourself with issues, misunderstanding, and then it's not to handle that well. So I hope as well with the content today is just to start for people to have a bit more understanding and talk openly more about it. And the last part I wanted to ask as well about leading. You also have started your position as a lead product lead, right?
Yeah.
So I assume by the title as well and the responsibility, you're leading a group, a project, a lot of responsibilities. And what are the tools for you or maybe challenges it is when in your lead role, you are an influential role, right? So your actions, your energy, negative or positive, have a multiplier effect.
Yeah.
And so I can see the challenge, of course, where maybe you don't always control what's happening, and that's part of life anyway for individuals. How is the experience for you? What are the tools for you, or still challenges that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, so I guess there's some tools that I've used in just my own self-management that have been really useful that then also apply to managing a team. So my memory is really bad, and now I write everything down, everything that happens in meetings and everything I need to do. And I have quite an organized system of notes. And that kind of becomes my superpower as well as my weakness, because if somebody asks me what happened in a meeting 3 weeks ago, I can tell them. And that's really great because it's meant that my bad memory has ended up helping me in some way. I've learned about things like Pomodoro technique and like other ways of managing my attention span. And that allows me to be more empathetic and understanding when someone else is like having trouble meeting their deadlines, or to sort of give suggestions to them of what might help them that has helped me before. So that's the things that I think have helped with how I can lead a team. Definitely, like, it has made me more empathetic to go through those things myself as well. If you see someone struggling, my first instinct is to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt and think what else might be going on and how can I support them? And maybe there's some other like angle I can try. It's definitely like given me an overview of like the different things that I can do to try and help motivate someone in a different way. And it's also helped with just giving some perspective as well about what the most important outcomes are for having like a sustainable, long-term, productive team. Like, it helps you get an idea of what things can slip and what things need to be prioritized, because when you're really struggling to focus in a work day, it means that you aggressively prioritize the time that you do have. And you're getting really good at looking, okay, this thing needs to happen. This thing's a blocker. And those are just kind of production skills as well. So it helps you with running a team and planning workloads and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely strengthened the interpersonal relationships with other people in the team as well, because when you talk openly about these things, it invites others to do the same, and it means that you can have a more genuine and sincere relationship and discussion about those kinds of issues.
Mm-hmm. So I do understand when you have also shared openly about your mental health condition or challenges, and that has been part of the way you lead.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm curious because here you talk a lot about processes or tools or methods you have applied for yourself that you found that have worked for you, which is the result of a lot of introspection work, iteration for yourself. How did you get there? Did you learn by yourself? Were you helped along the way? How did you know what worked for you to find your best way of working?
Yeah, there was a lot of trial and error. Like when I hit that massive sort of snag in working during the pandemic, there was lots of different things I tried, lots that didn't work and some that did. But I've also had a lot of therapy. Like I find that really useful for overcoming challenges and also maintaining my mental health and my self-esteem and stuff like that to keep them in good condition. I have looked so much at online resources as well to try and see like what the advice is. And there's more and more people in the games industry who are talking about things like neurodiversity. There's a group that has just recently been started called Playing Attention in the UK that's talking about ADHD in the games industry. There's Safe in Our World that is offering like free courses and all different kinds of resources to people who want to learn more about mental health. And there's more and more material that I can look at and be like, okay, here are some strategies to try. But also having this kind of open dialogue with my friends and family has helped a lot as well. And it's really useful to have someone to talk to in that capacity and to have friends I can talk to about my mental health struggles as well.
Great tools and also very actionable. So thanks for sharing. We're reaching the end of the conversation today. There was a lot, especially also for me to absorb and reflect on, very helpful. It will help me as well to think about how we can have more modern workplaces, supporting different talents at work. My last question to finish as well the conversation today. What is the thing you are excited about looking forward, especially with your new role?
Oh, there's loads of things I'm really looking forward to. Some of them I can't talk about because they've not been announced yet, but there's definitely a lot of exciting things coming up. And I think mentorship is always something that really invigorates me. And like, I've recently been doing a lot of like ad hoc mentorship, just like one-off meetings with people trying to get into the industry via LinkedIn. And it's really kind of grown the people I speak to and that audience to be more global, because I'm speaking to someone who's based in Pakistan, to someone based in the US, to someone based in Nigeria. So I wouldn't meet these people in the UK games industry. And so it's really exciting to feel like I can be helpful to people around the world. Like, that always is my endorphins button, I guess, to try and make myself feel better on a bad day, is to do something related to mentorship, because it just makes me feel good about myself. But I'm really excited to have a year of being active in the industry and going to talks and giving talks and things like that.
That sounds amazing and very inspiring. I'm looking forward to seeing more future talks or even people you have helped elevate in the industry. That sounds really exciting.
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, I look forward to seeing what you continue to do as well, because Rise and Play is definitely one of the things that inspires me a lot.
Oh, thanks a lot. It means a lot to me. Well, thanks, Alice, for the talk today. Take care, and we will connect for sure after this episode on other forms. Thanks for listening to this latest episode of the Rise and Play podcast. I am trying to grow a community of conscious leaders across the industry and beyond. So, if you want to join this movement, please share the podcast with other conscious leaders, because we have so much more we can learn from each other. Also, please don't forget to follow the show so you don't miss out on future content. Every episode is packed with actionable insights that will help you improve your leadership skills now. And if you are interested in learning more on the topics that we discussed today, you can find more insights on riseandplay.io, and there you will also find my free masterclass on conscious leadership. So, have a great week, and until the next time,